Chapter 146. Azkaban Hurts the Soul. Professor Snape would not want me to throw my life away, Harry told himself firmly. It had been the one defining point of their relationship, the touchstone against which Harry had built the rest of his life. Professor Snape wanted him alive. He couldn't just walk up to Voldemort and say, "Hello, why don't you destroy your last Horcrux today?" Or no, there was still the diadem and Nagini. Why hadn't he destroyed the diadem yet? It had just slipped his mind, slipped everyone's minds. Voldemort, Harry thought tiredly, was a tricky person. He'd have to remember to destroy it before he died. Which would not be today, he scolded himself as he trudged down the winding stone staircase. There wasn't any point to him dying today. Professor Snape wouldn't like it. "Hey, Hermione," he said, summoning up a smile. "How's it going down here?" She was surrounded by people, as usual, order spreading from her in a wave of intimidating efficiency. Ron and his terrier stood at her right hand, guarding her back. "Harry, oh, you look like death. Have some chocolate." She thrust a chocolate bar into his hands, and he ate it mechanically. Some of the feeling of being tainted lifted, but he still felt strange and otherworldly, only loosely tethered to the ground. Would he float away if he wasn't careful, as if caught up in a flight spell? "Before I forget again, Hermione, can I get the diadem from you?" he asked. "Oh, sure," she said distractedly. "I suppose you should have it, since you're the one looking for them." The diadem, Harry noticed with dark amusement, was definitely messing with their heads. Hermione handed it over without a whisper, and the pain in his scar seemed to redouble the moment he touched it. Right, that wouldn't do. He had planned to just destroy it, but... With a grimace of distaste at using his new blackthorn wand, he secured a square of spider silk and milkweed fiber pressed into felt and wrapped the diadem with jerky motions, reluctance scraping at the edges of his mind like black, broken fingernails. The sensation faded as it was completely wrapped up in silk. Harry sighed and looked at Hermione, whose gaze seemed a little less fierce. Hermione, he was reminded, would make a terrible dark lady, if glorious. "What should I be doing?" he asked her, tucking the diadem into his pocket and eyeing the sword of Gryffindor strapped to Ron's back. Where had Ron gotten a sword sheath anyway? It looked very natural. When had his friends grown up? Harry didn't feel grown up enough to die. Funny. Harry took another stubborn bite of chocolate. "Teaching again," she said apologetically. "We're keeping everyone who can make a reasonable patroness here longest, but everyone's tired. If you could get a few more to make that step towards a corporeal patroness." "I'll do my best," he promised. A job was good. A job wasn't letting his thoughts eat themselves like some mythological Norse serpent. "What's the schedule like on the evacuation?" "We should be able to get another 100 off the island today," she said, eyes bright and false. Harry narrowed his eyes at her, and she shook her head slightly, eyes darting to their anxious audience of recently released Muggle-born adults. "Oh, right. Causing a panic really would kill them all, because a patroness was all about attitude." "Sounds good," Harry said cheerily. "Come see me when you have a minute, will you? Hardly had time to think in this mess, and I could use an assistant teacher." "I'll do that, Harry," Hermione promised. Harry cleared his mind of everything but happiness and taught the patroness charm as if nothing was wrong. Occlumency was, after all, good for something. "So," Harry said in a dark corner of the interior courtyard of Azkaban they were using for teaching, looking at Hermione and Sirius, "how bad is it?" Morning was passing on, and noon was fast approaching. Sky McCloud, a witch with an affinity for weather, told me this morning that there'd be a storm rolling in this afternoon, Hermione said very quietly. She went with the last group. The hippogriffs aren't coming back until it clears, which could be the day after tomorrow. There's too much chance of us losing them. Well, that was sufficiently awful. 10 minutes ago, she went on, more Dementors started coming out of the sea. They must have some way to communicate. They called back the ones who were traveling around nearby to provide reinforcements. What was Harry talking about? Obviously, it wasn't sufficiently awful. For once in his life, Harry Potter had nothing to say. Sirius, Hermione ploughed on, has a portkey for you for sunset tonight. He made it up before coming out here. So, we'll stay here to take care of things, and you'll get on with the job. Oh, Merlin, no. You're going, Sirius growled. If I have to stun you and tie you to the portkey, it'll take you to Shell Cottage, where there are Weasleys to sit on you. No, 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 no. We know you want to stay, Hermione said gently. But we'll be fine here, really. We might have to come to a compromise, but the war will be over soon, and then things will be fine. You mean locking yourselves in, for Dementors to feed on, sort of a voluntary buffet? Hermione paled, her lips thinned, but her eyes were steady. Sirius was staring off into the middle distance at nothing at all. Better than not having iron bars between us and them, Harry, she said quietly. I'll arrange everything, just try not to worry. That's just the backup plan. There's tons more to do before it comes to that. Harry ran a hand over his face and wondered if she'd gone crazy or if he had. Try not to worry. Serious? He asked, after Hermione had given him a watery smile and rushed off to whatever her next item on her checklist was. If I'd been there to die for James, I would have, Sirius said quietly. I wasn't. Least I can do is this now, get you out of here. Come with me, Sirius. You can't stay here. And why am I any more worthy than your friends, than anyone else here? How'd we choose? How, indeed? I'm not more worthy, Harry snarled, desperation making him want to hit the man. You've got to face him, Sirius said flatly. For James, for Lily, for Peter, even the little rat. He wasn't always bad. You'll do that, won't you? Would Sirius ask it of him if Sirius knew? Would Sirius hate him if Sirius knew? Harry took a slow breath, summoned up a smile, and lied. You're right, Sirius. Nothing else I can do, is there? Chapter 147, Harry's Terrible Plan. What time is the portkey? Harry asked, not bothering to act too innocent. He was resentful as hell, and Sirius would be suspicious if he didn't act it. There wasn't much else to say. Harry absently summoned a packet of mints and ate those instead of lunch. It wasn't as if the goo Neville had created from the local flora appealed to him today. Somewhere far away, Voldemort was very angry, and an emotion Harry couldn't recognize in him. It felt almost like grief. Except Voldemort was not the sort of man to grieve. The pain felt like being stabbed in the head, like it would split open any moment. I'll talk to you later then, Harry said, and hoped Sirius thought he was angry, not that he was in pain. He needed to find, here was a dismal nook, underneath a dank stone staircase. He leaned against damp black stone and tried to catch his breath. There had to be a way out of this. He had to see a way out of this that wasn't, if only he could think. He didn't know, later, how long he stayed there, caught up in his thoughts running in circles and the blinding headache. Eventually, he fumbled a bottle of sleeping potion from his pocket and drank it in 2 swift swallows. He slumped against the wall and let his mind drift off to sleep and Voldemort. They were kneeling on a stone floor, chanting a long series of spells over Nagini. Harry took a moment to see why, and he was torn between chagrin and happiness. The long, ragged wound that Ron had sliced into her side, nearly taking her head off, had grown black edges and had deepened until he could see bone. It was gruesome, and she held unnaturally still as Voldemort cast again and again. He didn't notice Harry at all. The slender wand in his hand, with the pattern of berries along its length, dancing to his hissing tune. Voldemort, Harry realized with dull resignation, had the Elder Wand. Wasn't that just typical of today? There went that half-formed plan that Dumbledore had left for him. Being the master of death had sounded nice. Reassuring, like he actually had a chance of winning this war and surviving. What had Sirius said, years ago, when Arthur Weasley had been nearly killed by this very same snake? Some things were worth dying for. It would be kinder, Harry thought aloud, to put her out of her misery. Well, someone was in a bad mood. Harry entirely failed to sympathize. I'm serious. It's just cruel. It's not like that's easily cured, you know. And what precisely is that? Don't you know? Basilisk venom. It never hurts to check your answers, Harry. Harry did not think this was the time for lessons. I would have thought you'd know your antidotes, Harry commented. Phoenix tears are not easily obtainable in quantity, even for me. It's really too bad absolute power over wizarding Britain isn't really good for much, huh? That is quite enough, Voldemort whispered in that cold, hissing way of his, and Harry realized he probably shouldn't have been antagonizing his mortal enemy. Voldemort's anger was an icy ocean, bottomless, endless. You have interfered with my designs for the last time, Harry Potter, and today you too shall lose something that matters. It turned out that they were in the basement of Malfoy Manor, which was apparently where one went for snake care. They climbed up out of the basement in eerie silence. They started walking through the hallway, up the stairs. Harry recognized this hallway and those stairs. They were on the way to Professor Snape's room. He's useful, Harry pointed out worriedly. Harry, it has probably come to your attention by now that I have a temper. I have other potion masters and other options for the roles I had planned for him. I can indulge myself. As if Professor Snape was a toy, to be broken when one had a bad day. But then, that was Voldemort all over, wasn't it? Professor Snape was going to die. He couldn't die. He had to yell at Harry for trying to get himself killed. They came to the head of the stairs and turned down the corridor towards Professor Snape's room. They opened the door and leveled their wand at the figure half hidden in the bed. And at that moment, Harry committed to his terrible idea that he had had looking at Sirius just an hour earlier. Wait, he thought quickly, and Voldemort hesitated just for a moment. I want to make a deal. Still hesitation. You said I could trade myself for safety for my friends and family. Harry plowed on into the mental silence. You said it would be a good deal for you because I keep getting in your way. Wouldn't you like that? I could just not be here anymore, to irritate you. Kill him now and you don't know when you'll find me again. I could move to South America or something. Australia, Finland. I'm afraid I don't believe you, Harry. Not for one man, no matter how much you might care. You are not a fool. He's not the only one in danger, Harry thought wildly, quickly, because he knew that Fey tone, knew that casual, deadened calm. Voldemort had already decided he was just playing it out. They all are. I got them into something bad. I was stupid. And try, though I might, to think of a way around it. I think you're probably the only person who can help. Voldemort snorted, a quiet, amused noise. The man in the bed stirred and sat up. Their wand was hidden again, as if they had never been 2 seconds from murder. My lord, asked Snape's sleep-roughened voice. Prepare yourself. We have a mission. Snape pulled himself out of bed, and Voldemort sat down in an armchair in his sitting room, watching the fire, and steepled his long, pale fingers. Where am I going, Harry? It was Harry's turn to hesitate. Oh, it was only logical. Oh, he wasn't more important than all his friends and the rest of the world, but he didn't die, not really. There was a lot of magic he hadn't tried and potions he hadn't made. And even if Snape had once told him, over the creation of Wolfsbane, in a cutting, venomous tone, that Voldemort was a man of his word, there was hanging his own life on this, and then there was telling Voldemort where to find his friends. Snape said something and Harry missed it entirely. My word, Harry, Voldemort thought in his most false, most gentle tone, that upon your death your friends' and family's lives will be spared. I shall not even imprison them. Allow me to show you mercy, Harry. This wasn't mercy. But not imprisoned was better than in Azkaban at the mercy of Dementors, and Harry's life was his own to throw away, if his fragile bridge of logic held, if he wasn't just Dementor mad, if he could trust Dumbledore's never-spoken plan, and his own instinct to throw it out the window, because sometimes life didn't work out the way you wanted. In that moment, It came down to Harry being unable to watch Voldemort kill anyone else he loved in front of him. It has to be just you, Harry thought. No Death Eaters, no minions, just you and me. I have no reason to accede to this request. Harry hooked a memory from his own mind and thrust it out past his shields. Harry, wrapping a tiara set with blue stones in a white silken cloth and tucking it into his pocket. How do you feel about bribery? Harry asked, feeling mad and fey and daring. Harry felt Voldemort's shock, and then his horror and disbelief. You think I have a sword impregnated with basilisk venom by accident? Harry challenged. So you have leverage. So do I. It was interesting to realize what effect madness had on a mind. Everything in Voldemort's mind seemed scattered, breaking apart and crashing together. His emotions had no tethers to hold them. All was a storm of anger and hatred, and not death, anything but death, the lust for power and the fear of pain. Oh, Harry, what I would like to do to you. I'm offering you a chance, Harry said, and tried to hide all the emotions he could feel bubbling up and trying to disrupt his occlumency. Take your temper out on me, for once not whoever's in front of you. Me and a Horcrux for safety for my friends and family. Do we have a deal? Your life to spare others my wrath, as well as that which you stole. Yes, Harry, we have a deal. And gently again, just tell me where, Harry. I will meet you on the north shore of Azkaban Isle, an hour before sunset. Does that give you enough time to get there? I can be there much more quickly than that. Now, I need to arrange things here so no one interferes. What have you gotten yourself into? I picked a fight with an army of Dementors, mostly, and dragged all your little friends along for the ride. Harry really had nothing to say to that. Heroes, Voldemort thought with grim amusement. So predictable. You, Harry thought grimly, are not making my awful day any better. You are making a very good decision, Harry, Voldemort murmured. Wake up now and try to relax. Harry woke up, put his hands over his face, and held very still for a long time. Chapter 148. Goodbyes. A kitten was staring at him. Harry looked up, through dry eyes that burned at the pink nose, drooping whiskers, and perked forward ears of a hunting Draco Malfoy, and indulged an impulse he'd had ever since the first time he saw Draco as a cat. He scooped him up and cuddled him. The cat growled, of course. Don't hiss at me. You're a good friend, you know, even if we don't like to admit it. The cat stopped hissing, and Harry indulged in stroking the white ears. They pressed back against the cat's skull, and fluffy fur and adorable tail, which lashed. Okay, Harry said, laughing quietly. I'll stop. And he put Draco down, stood, stretched, smiled. You know where Ron and Hermione are? He asked Draco, who shook himself all over, flicked his tail, and led the way. Hermione was outside, in what was beginning to be light snow, fighting Dementors with Neville and Ron. I'm sorry, Harry, but I don't have time to argue, Hermione said tightly, little Otter holding off what seemed a solid wave of Dementors. And it will make me cry, which would be bad, you see. Harry hugged her firmly, and she squeaked. What was with everyone today? It's all right, Hermione. You're just trying to protect me. Can I borrow Ron for a minute? Ron glanced at him, glanced away. Sure, she said, but go back to the tower. You know you have a terrible reaction to Dementors. Ron and Harry trudged back up towards the tower in silence. Harry led him into the first empty room he came to, checking absently for stinging things, oozing things, or things on the ceiling that were about to drop on his head to try to eat him. Azkaban was an interesting place. This one had already been pretty thoroughly cleared. I can't come with you, Ron said suddenly. This is all my fault. I have to stick with her. Stick with Hermione, Harry said firmly. Have lots of curly-haired babies. When the war's over, I thought it'd be cute, you know. But you, her. Me, her? Harry asked as he dug in his pocket. I thought you and Hermione, all that time alone. Most of that time alone was with Draco along, Harry pointed out, finally finding the silk-wrapped tiara and placing it dead center in the middle of the room. Whack that with the sword, would you? But it should be you, Ron said plaintively, apparently about a lot of things. It really wasn't the time to argue, except it really was. I've found it never pays to overthink things too much in this heroing lark, Harry informed him. Now take out your confusion and terror on the shiny metal thing. And Ron hit the tiara with the sword, just as fiercely as he could, and the floor fell in beneath them and launched them into a dungeon full of monsters. Harry indulged in a little swearing, fighting back to back with Ron, and every moment of this memory was going into his vault to use to summon Patronus charms as he laughed and fired spells as they blasted the tentacled things and made a run for the stairs upwards. Don't know what they're talking about, Ron gasped, back in the clear light of the courtyard, where the snow was coming down thick and fast now. Azkaban's frankly cuddly. Great vacation spot. Bring the whole family. Sirius was being a dog, laying in the entrance of the tower and growling at everyone who stepped over him. Harry patted his head. You're a ridiculous old man, he told Sirius comfortably, and sat down and leaned against his warm, shaggy black side. But that suits me. I'm a ridiculous kid. The dog snorted at him. Should I kiss Ginny Weasley for luck? The dog paused and turned to look at him. Sirius eyed Harry thoughtfully and jerked his doggy chin in a nod. Great, Harry said, smiled, and hugged his godfather. Sirius was always somehow easier to hug in dog form. Harry happened to run into Luna and Greg before he found Ginny, however, so he paused to tell them to look after themselves, and to tell Luna that he'd liked her hair better the other way. She played with a strand of it, eyes not quite focusing on him as he strode past. Ginny was taking a break from Azkaban to drink green goop out of a cauldron. There was snow in her long red hair. She was grubby, and she was beautiful. Ginny, can you do me a favor? Sure, Harry, she said, as long as it doesn't take any time or energy. Harry grinned. Not much, no. He kissed her, and the kiss went on for longer than he had meant it to, as he wove his fingers into her hair. Then she slapped him. This did not make him stop grinning. You shouldn't kiss girls when you don't mean it, she told him severely. This was true, Harry knew. Sorry, Ginny, he said, and attempted to look sheepish. The grin probably didn't help. What's this about then? She said, hands on hips. It seemed like we could use some luck, was all, he said with a shrug. Is that okay? Yeah, Harry, that's okay. And it was okay, somehow. Harry even had a chance to pat Neville on the shoulder before Histampasham told him it was time to leave. Harry found his mind turning back, incongruously, to a moment from last fall when he'd watched a little girl in a purple dress ride a puppy around a park, waving a stick like a sword. He'd never learned her name. What waited for little girls in purple dresses if Voldemort ruled? Fear, at best. Torture and death, at worst. Harry didn't honestly think his family and friends would want him to sacrifice himself for them. A complete stranger, though, that would be different. He could sacrifice his life for the peace of a little girl whose parents would never be murdered in front of her. For a lot of little girls. Wasn't he a unicorn, after all? Maybe he wasn't completing the whole prophecy this way, but at least without his Horcruxes, Voldemort was vulnerable. It meant there was a chance. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the little snitch, his gift from Dumbledore. He kissed it for luck. I'm about to die, he told it, because he couldn't tell his friends. They wouldn't understand. They wouldn't have this wild, burning hope that maybe, like his mother, his death could mean something if he held it close to his heart. It would be nice to be like his mother. The snitch clicked open, and a ring with a black stone fell out into his hands. Chapter 149, Death. Harry talked to his mum and dad, and it was wonderful and it was heartbreaking. Then, because Sirius was unsubtly guarding the front gate, he put on his invisibility cloak and gently hovered his way down from a second-story window at the back of the tower. He landed on one knee, his light, powdery, fresh-fallen snow, and was absently pleased that the white broke up the black-on-black color scheme of the island. There was no path down this way, but the snow made the aggressive vines sluggish. Harry kept his cloak on and picked his way through them down to the uneven shore. The sea was laced with whitecaps, and the jagged rocks of the coast were hidden by the coating of white. He had to slow down to avoid breaking an ankle, so it was from a distance he saw two dark-robed figures alight on the beach, flying without broomsticks. Two. Well, Harry hadn't exactly come into this meeting forthrightly and above board, either. He shrugged off his invisibility cloak and stuffed it into a pocket. "Harry Potter," Voldemort said, and his voice was different aloud than in Harry's head. It had been a long time since Harry had seen him in person, snake-faced and aloof, voice high, cold, amused, eyes red. Harry glanced briefly at the man next to Voldemort and then away. He needed to stay calm, or his occlumency shield stood a good chance of flagging, with Voldemort so close, and that had a horrible chance often it being fatal. "Hullo," said Harry, made awkward by the reality of the situation sinking in. A killing curse failed to strike him. Harry felt even more awkward. "You can kill me," Harry said, twisting his unfamiliar wand between his fingers. "Just let them live." Voldemort laughed, high and cold. "Trying your mother's trick, Harry?" "Yeah," Harry said. "I guess I am." "I see you have brought young Mr. Malfoy." Harry glanced behind him, but didn't see so much as a flicker of Draco's white tail against the snow. Legerdemains were a pain. Friends were a pain. But at least he could talk to this friend obliquely, and he would get the hint. "All the rest of my friends would try to stop me," Harry said with perfect truth. "Draco cares about Draco. Anyway, I'm not the only one who failed to come alone. Hello, Professor." Snape glowered at him, hook-nosed, hair looking particularly awful, standing firm at his master's side. He was carrying Nagini in his arms, the snake limp and dead-looking. "Potter, this is foolish, even for you." "Why is he here?" Harry asked Voldemort, ignoring that comment, as if Harry didn't already know that. "I made Severus a promise some years ago. In exchange for his service, I promised him that your death would be quick and painless. He has been faithful to me ever since, and so I am here to let him witness. Is not Lord Voldemort merciful?" Harry blinked, trying to slot that into his mental map of the situation. A quick, painless death. That was more than he'd been expecting, honestly. "Thank you, my lord," Snape said. Snape looked at Voldemort, and Snape's face was like a death mask. It was marble white, and so still that when he spoke, it was a shock to see that anyone lived behind the blank eyes. "However, for your arrogance and for the harm you have done my cause, some repayment is in order. I promised Severus that I would make your death quick and clean," Voldemort said, gesturing at his silent servant. "But I never made any promises about his own. Kill." The last word had been in Parseltongue. Harry realized too late. The snake moved before Harry could, jaws latching onto Professor Snape's throat and sinking in. There was a terrible scream. Harry saw Snape's face losing the little color it had left. It whitened as his black eyes widened, as the snake's fangs pierced his neck, as his knees gave way and he fell. He did not know why he was doing it, why he was approaching the dying man. He did not know what he felt as he saw Snape's white face and the fingers trying to staunch the bloody wound at his neck. "He should last long enough to see your death," Voldemort said, drawing Harry's horrified attention. "Try to help him and I will consider it an end to our bargain, Harry." Without thought, Harry drew his unfamiliar wand and leveled it at the man and hesitated. Revenge wasn't part of the plan. "Drop your wand, unless you want the rest of your little friends to have their last moments beneath the cloak of a Dementor." Harry dropped his wand, the hated blackthorn thing, and held on frantically to his occlumency barriers. He needed. "Draco," he said suddenly, "help him." And Draco was there, flickering into human form by Snape's side, pressing frantic hands to the red, ignoring the blood on his hands and the blood on the white snow. I had planned to make a spectacle of this, Voldemort said familiarly, seeming content to ignore the spectacle that Harry couldn't look away from. But I find I like this better. It's more personal this way. Now, Harry, Voldemort continued, as Harry struggled to remain still and silent as a mouse before a snake, mind empty, mind empty. Remember, the key to being a ghost is to want to remain. Try to concentrate on that. As they used to say in my youth, death washes away all sins. Avada Kedavra. There was a flash of green light reflected in Snape's dark, fathomless eyes. Chapter 150, Crossroads and Confrontations. Harry turned slowly on the spot, and his surroundings seemed to invent themselves before his eyes. A wide-open space, bright and clean, a hall larger by far than the great hall, with that clear domed glass ceiling. It was quite empty. He was the only person there, except for he recoiled. He had spotted the thing that was making the noises. It had the form of a small, naked child, curled on the ground, its skin raw and rough, flayed-looking, and it lay shuddering under a seat where it had been left, unwanted, stuffed out of sight, struggling for breath. He was afraid of it. Small and fragile and wounded though it was, he did not want to approach it. Nevertheless, he drew slowly nearer, ready to jump back at any moment. Soon he stood near enough to touch it, yet he could not bring himself to do it. He felt like a coward. He ought to comfort it, but it repulsed him. You cannot help. He spun around. Albus Dumbledore was walking toward him, sprightly and upright, wearing sweeping robes of midnight blue. Harry, he spread his arms wide, and his hands were both whole and white and undamaged. You wonderful boy, you brave, brave man, let us walk. And Dumbledore explained, and Harry had been both right and terribly, beautifully wrong. Dumbledore made a great deal more sense now, and it was a day for saying things that needed to be said and saying goodbyes. Harry imagined a bag of lemon drops and passed them to his old headmaster, and they shared a smile. Because he had been right that he needed to die, but wrong that it had to be the end. For oh, there were so many things he hadn't done yet. Potions he hadn't made, people he hadn't saved, questions he hadn't answered. Harry could always talk to his parents again later, in due time. For now, the world of the living beckoned. He quite liked the surprise in store for Voldemort regarding the Elder Wand, as well. Harry woke up. The train station had been no temperature at all, which made the shock of cold even stronger. He was lying on the beach of Azkaban. Voldemort was talking. A fine statue, but my patience is at an end. Lower your wand, Draco. So you can kill me, Draco gasped. He sounded like he was in pain. There was a cry and a thump. Harry turned his head towards the noise and opened his eyes. It took a great deal of effort. Draco was over there, as if he'd tried to run, kneeling at Voldemort's feet, clutching his arm where Harry knew the dark mark lay. Nagini, where was Nagini? A dark lump in the snow there. And his temporary wand, he dug frantically through the snow here by his side. He clutched it. Could Harry move? He could. The snow had grown thicker. He could barely see Voldemort and Draco. Did he have time? Could he manage this last essential thing while Voldemort was distracted? He inched, ever so slowly, along on his belly, just another white lump. The rocks cut his hands as he pulled and pushed himself along, scraping his robes to tatters as he belly crawled. Nagini was not moving, forgotten in the snow. A discarded toy, but not yet quite dead. That wouldn't do. Harry pointed his wand at the cut stretching along the side of the giant snake's neck and whispered, Sectum Sempra. For enemies. The great head, finally severed from its body, moved no longer. Even more dark blood coated the snow. Harry struggled to his knees, body unfamiliar and coltish. Draco and Voldemort were still talking, though he'd lost the thread of conversation. There is forgiveness, even for this, Voldemort said, and Harry could barely hear him over the sound of the wind, and they were only two dark shadows in the whiteout. The time for foolishness is over. You can still be useful to Lord Voldemort, young Malfoy. I have basked in the reflected light of Potter's regard for you. I do not wish to kill you, even now. Before Draco could do something absurdly Gryffindor or depressingly Slytherin, Harry found his voice. You should finish killing me first. It would, at least, give Draco a chance to run. And if Dumbledore was right, if he was right. Harry didn't look behind him to where he could imagine Snape's crumbled corpse, drenched in blood. He couldn't think about that now. He'd been so calm before, and now that calm was crumbling into shards and ashes, back in a body that bled and cried and hurt. Harry pushed himself to his feet and squared his shoulders, and met Voldemort's furious red gaze as the man strode towards him. He found it in his heart to smile. Harry, Voldemort said sweetly, precisely how many lives do you have? I admit, I don't mind killing you, but even I am liable to get bored eventually. Not sure. How about a proper duel this time, just once more? He asked. For luck. Once you explain how you are doing this. Harry smiled, and he explained, and Voldemort did not believe him. Your conscience, Cricket, suggests this is a good time to repent, Harry said, echoing Voldemort's own gentle mockery back at him. Voldemort answered with a shriek, raising his wand. Avada Kedavra. Expelliarmus. The bang was like a cannon blast, and the golden flames that erupted between them at the dead center of the circle they had been treading marked the point where the spells collided. Harry saw Voldemort's green jet meet his own spell, saw the Elder Wand fly high, spinning through the air toward the master it would not kill, who had come to take full possession of it at last. And Harry, with the unerring skill of the Seeker, caught the wand in his free hand as Voldemort fell backward, arms splayed, the slit pupils of the scarlet eyes rolling upward. Tom Riddle hit the floor with a mundane finality, his body feeble and shrunken, the white hands empty, the snake-like face vacant and unknowing. Voldemort was dead, killed by his own rebounding curse, and Harry stood with two wands in his hand, staring down at his enemy's shell. One shivering second of silence, the shock of the moment suspended. The only sound on the beach was the crash of waves, the gentle silence of falling snow, and their harsh breathing. Harry turned then and started towards where he knew his teacher had been. There was still a dark shape there, kneeling. Don't look, Draco said suddenly, into the quiet. Harry had never shied away from painful things in his life. He drew closer and saw a kneeling grey statue of his professor, his mentor, his teacher, clutching at a trail of shiny red stone that coated his neck and the side of his robes. His eyes were blank white marble, and the harsh lines of his face were carved in shadows of grief and despair. Harry thought about Draco's last attempt to turn a stone mouse back into a living mouse, and the red spatter that had resulted. You can reverse it, right, Draco, Draco. Harry's heart beat in time with the waves crashing against the shore, but silence was the only response. Chapter 151, A Quiet Interlude. Harry was repairing his holly wand when he felt a chill in the air and heard a woman scream. He smiled, feeling both vindictive and hopeful in equal measure, and thought about fighting tentacled things back to back with Ron. Expecto Patronum, he called, and his stag answered the movement of the Elder Wand. And as he looked into the silver eyes, Harry knew that this stag would not fade until its job was done, and that it would be able to do more to Dementors than simply harry them. Go, Harry said softly, and make this island safe. The stag bent his neck in acknowledgement, turned towards the Dementors approaching, lowered its magnificent antlers, and charged. Well, Harry thought with some satisfaction that was relaxing. He tucked away his two spare wands, must do something with those later, and looked for a moment at his holly wand. It was like greeting an old friend, sorely missed. Or perhaps sort of dying, made one philosophical. Draco, Harry thought suddenly, was being rather quiet. He looked at Draco. Draco was staring at Professor Snape's statue, something dark twisting his expression. So, Harry said, this was quite the idea you had. I saw you hit by a killing curse and collapse to the ground in a faint, Draco said flatly, not looking at Harry. I know what you fainting looks like. I had to distract him somehow. Well, it worked. Good job. Good job, he says, as if he didn't get hit by the killing curse at Wyst. You know, Harry, you would still be the best Dark Lord ever if you just showed a little dignity. Never, anyway. He only hit me with it once. Only once. You know its speciality is being unable to be blocked. You can't just deflect killing curse. It's complicated, Harry said, beginning to be defensive and suddenly remembering something of the circumstances of the day. Maybe we could just not mention that part to anyone, ever. I feel like they might overreact. Overreact to you being immune from death. I'm not for immune from death, Harry tried, pleased to be arguing with Draco again, even as he wondered absently if they were going to freeze to death arguing out here in the snow. It was really only Voldemort. There was a prophecy and things. I can't even argue with you saying the Dark Lord's name anymore. Sure you can. Argument's good for the soul. I am never, ever coming on an adventure with Yowver again, Draco said with deep, bitter sincerity. But we're having so much fun, Harry chirped, just to be contrary. Draco deliberately bent down, scooped up a handful of snow, balled it up, and threw it with perfect accuracy at Harry's head. That was how serious Ron and Hermione found them, having a rather manic snowball fight by a dead man and an ambiguously alive statue. Harry, said Sirius, looking strangely dry and not covered in blood. Draco had blood in his hair and on his hands, and Harry was simply caked in snow. You're late. Harry paused in rubbing snow into Draco's hair. He was helping him clean it. Really he was, and eyed Sirius. I had an appointment, Harry said finally. I can't even swear at you, Sirius said. Kid, what happened? Harry did not want to answer that question. He sat back in the snow and gestured for Draco to narrate. Harry killed the Dark Lord, Draco summarized, and took his powers and used them to create an extremely large silver stag. I was never here, saw nothing, and if anyone asks, I don't know any of you. Thanks, Harry said dryly. You are welcome to the enemies that will come out of the woodwork because of all this, Draco said, with an emphatic hand waving at the snow and the sea and the body. Oh, right, the body. Thanks, Harry repeated, and started to shiver. There was more talking, and then he was bundled up in a cloak, and Sirius was carrying him somewhere. That was nice. There was something he'd been meaning to say to Sirius. What was it? Sorry about dying a little, Harry assured him. It really wasn't that bad. And Dad says hello and good job, and Mum says hello and stop introducing me to the weird bands. Your taste in music is still atro. Atrocious, Sirius rumbled quietly. Why am I never the? Because we love you and want to keep you safe. Stupid. Get some sleep, kid, before I give in to the urge to knock you unconscious. Harry thought that sounded pretty darn good right about then. He was very cold and having a hard time not thinking about Professor Snape being stone. That was upsetting. Really, pretty upsetting. Harry slept. He deserves a grave, Draco was saying, low and quiet. He was a great man. He was a psychotic mass murderer who wanted us all dead or mind-draped into submission, said Sirius. He deserves to be eaten by sharks, and I intend to give it to him. He was a great man once, Draco said. My father told me, a long time ago before things went wrong. If you think Tom Riddle was ever right, you're as bad as your father. HN, Harry said, because there was a rule about talking about Draco's father. They didn't do that. Harry, Draco asked. I want him buried, Harry said. Here will do, but put Tom Riddle as the name. He'd hate that. He opened his eyes. He was lying in a bed, and though the room was the black stone of Azkaban, the horrifically heavy atmosphere that deadened the place had lifted. It was just a room, and he was lying on a rather comfortable cloth pallet. Neat. The light was pale, and the window was covered in a white cloth. It was warm. He cuddled against his pillow, which was the best pillow he'd touched since almost dying again. I shouldn't, Sirius said, reaching out to brush Harry's hair out his eyes. He was sitting cross-legged next to Harry's pallet, watching him with dark eyes. You are in so much trouble there are no more words for it, Harry. But he's not going to kill any more kids, Harry pointed out. I really hated him doing that. I didn't much like him killing adults either, Sirius said with tired good humor. You did so good, but you are still in so much trouble. Life's unfair that way. Life was, indeed, unfair. Do I need to get up and fight more things? Have Ron tell you about the thing in the basement with the tentacles? I heard. Sirius tucked the blanket up to Harry's chin. You can stay in bed if you want. Harry did want. He wanted to stay in bed and watch the snow through the window curtain and not really think about anything, and that's exactly what he did. After a few minutes, Draco said, Can I get you anything? About 24 hours with no one yelling at me for trying to kill myself, Harry said, having thought about this. After that, they can take turns, but I'm feeling a little. How was he feeling? Weird. Weird. You're feeling weird. Okay, I'll get Greg to guard you. Greg doesn't even have the vocabulary to yell at you if he wanted to. Harry hummed agreeably, watched the snow fall, and heard Draco leave the room. Chapter 152. Sirius takes care of things. If a dictator falls in a forest, does he make a sound? The first odd thing Harry found in the following days was that killing Voldemort did not end the war. The Ministry was still full of Death Eaters and mind-controlled puppets. The Death Eaters still had their army of giants and their werewolf and vampire allies, even if the remaining Dementors had decided that they were best suited for a quiet, rural lifestyle on, say, a mysterious island, not cluttering up towns and byways. The second odd thing was that no one seemed to expect him to fight anything. Oh, he tried, but with the Dementors cowed to his, Will Azkaban just wasn't that bad anymore. The only reason they stayed was because they needed to thoroughly brick up the Floo entrance and secure it for a base for Hermione's new Muggle-born army, of which Harry was an honorary member. Not that it was a permanent base, but until they had some place to go, they were staying put. Draco had come up with a new political slogan for his inevitable run for minister against Hermione. Muggleborns, they're terrifying. Harry had to admit, it was both catchy and accurate. When Hermione and Ron weren't in the process of training a paramilitary force of grateful, slightly mad, and increasingly dangerous wizards and witches, they camped out by Harry's bedside for the first couple days. This involved some tears and some yelling. Harry could have left his bed, but it would have involved dealing with people and questions, neither of which he felt he had the patience for. He had a great deal of work to do, after all. He had a feeling his potion to assist with people afflicted with dark curses was going to be very necessary, sooner than later, and so he'd gone back to basics, a basic runic syllabary and 1001 herbs and fungi. Both were soothing, familiar companions. Harry's friends all visited him, as well as nearly everyone else on the island, the stubborn remainder of the prisoners they'd rescued. Greg allowed only his friends past the door, taking to his new job of professional loomer as if made for it. On Harry's third morning since Voldemort's death, the solid sleeping presence of Sirius shook himself thoroughly with the dawn and changed into a man, a frowning man. Nice morning, Harry tried. Weather's quieted down. And we're leaving today, Sirius informed him. So up you get. But no, I have to. You have to what, Harry? The statue, Harry muttered. Yes, Draco said you were avoiding that. Well, I've dealt with old Snape. Harry shot, bolt upright. By stealing a boat, Harry, calm down. Calm down. He's fine, I mean, as fine as a man who is a statue can be. Draco did a good, thorough transformation. He'll need help untransfiguring him and some damn practice. I heard about the mice, but we can take care of that. Say something, Harry. Harry shook himself. Right, Harry said. A boat. Stole it off some muggles, Sirius said sheepishly. Commandeered. I've got papers that say I'm allowed to take stuff if I need it, but it always makes me feel shifty. And it might be a ship, I'm not nautical. Sirius, what have you been doing the past few years? Sirius completely ignored the question. Couldn't you untransfigure him? I mean, I know you don't like him, but... Sirius sighed. I would if I could, Harry, if only to see his face afterwards, but I won't risk it going wrong. No, you want Professor McGonagall, which is convenient what with you going back to Hogwarts when term starts. I'm what? No. Security there isn't as tight as it was when you were hiding in there, Sirius continued. Just a few Death Eaters to clear out, and then we'd have one of our strongholds back. It's going to be a pain in the neck clearing the Ministry, but if we take Hogwarts, that's a start. Take it, but what are you going to do with the Carrows and the others? No idea, Sirius said cheerfully. I'm sure I'll come up with something in the heat of the moment. After all, I'd hate to go into something absurdly dangerous with a plan. That, Harry thought, was a bit too on the nose, and he glared at Sirius. Some people would be nice to me right now, he told Sirius. Because of, I don't know, trauma, I might cry. Yeah, Rita Skeeter will love that. She'll write another book, Harry Potter defeated the Dark Lord, and then cried about it. How long am I going to be in trouble? Forever, or at least until you agree to stay safe at Hogwarts, while the Order wraps up the rest of the war. Hogwarts isn't safe yet. We can deal with a few Death Eaters, especially now that they're scared and leaderless, and we won't have to hide quite so hard. I can help, Harry said to his blanket. I really can. I won't fight him and then lose to someone else. Then you can be support and backup. If something goes really wrong, we'll call you in, but we won't waste you on raids. You have been rehearsing this in your head. I absolutely have, for days. Why did I think having a parent would be nice? Harry moaned. There was a pause. Dunno, but I've made it something of a lifestyle keeping Potters in more or less one piece, and without two swelled ahead, so I reckon I'm not stopping now. Harry flapped a hand at him. It's fine. I'm just doomed. You've been spending too much time with Draco Malfoy. This was, admittedly, true. Harry rolled out of bed and got up. A great deal of arguments later, involving quite a lot more yelling, and more than one day, it happened like this. They all sorted themselves out on a great boat, leaving the Floo once more unblocked, and the Dementors under strict orders to answer no questions on pain of Harry coming back. The Muggle-born army and Harry's friends took a boat officially commandeered by a shady branch of the Muggle government back to the mainland, where they were going to filter back into society in preparation for the end of Hogwarts' winter break. Harry leaned on a railing and felt the cold salt spray on his face and spotted Hermione striding by. Hey, Hermione, got a minute? You just have to ask, she said, and came and leaned on the railing next to him. How are you, Harry? I had an idea for how you could cheer me up. A prank I want to pull at Hogwarts. I think it'd be all right for the war effort, too, and I bet you aren't that thrilled about being packed up and left out either. Well, what is it? We have all this spare polyjuice now, which gave me the idea. Hermione, how do you feel about teaching Muggle studies? Chapter 153. Harry focuses on the important things. Hello, Mum, Ron said, coming down the stairs from his sick room. I found Ginny upstairs. Ginny, on the stairs behind him, nudged him with an elbow. Say something only you would know, Ron, she hissed. I'm getting there, Ron objected loudly. His mother burst into tears. Mother, father, Draco said, stepping into the parlor of Grimmauld Place and folding his hands together to keep them from shaking. His parents looked perfect, sitting by the fire. He had never felt less perfect in his life. I hope you have been well. Very well, Draco, dear, his mother said with polite warmth. Sit down, won't you? He sat, endlessly grateful that none of the army or the order were here to witness this. "The Dark Lord has perished quite finally," Draco said, looking at the fire. "I can personally attest to it as a witness." His mother gasped, a horrible tiny sound. "I hope you are happy," his father said. "I think I am beginning to understand your advice about pragmatism, father," Draco said, still looking at the fire. "We must think about the family after all." There was silence for a little while. "Are you well, Draco?" asked his mother. It surprised Draco more than it surprised his parents when he broke down telling the story. Harry Potter and Hermione Granger did not go home for the last few days of Christmas break. Under cover of invisibility and polyjuice, they flew into Hogwarts on the back of Witherwings. It was embarrassing easy to poison the Carrows, with easy access to Derby and the Hogwarts kitchens. Harry felt almost bad, but why come up with a slow-acting poison that causes sleep and horrific nightmares for use on terrible teachers, if not, indeed, to use it on terrible teachers? A storage chest, bought and hastily reconfigured for the purpose, became 2 prison cells. Harry's sense of irony liked it, and Hermione and Sirius did not object. Harry could have told Ron, who would have objected on the grounds of it being creepy, but he didn't. Ron was going home for a little while, and wasn't that for the best? Harry and Hermione were the ones who couldn't show their faces at Hogwarts without starting a miniature war. Sirius had also bought Harry an ankle holster for a spare wand. It seemed rude, somehow, to carry the Elder Wand around strapped to his ankle, but he also didn't have a better idea. The war wasn't over, and he certainly wasn't going Talos the thing after all the trouble he'd had with it. Prim, proper, and predatory, Electo Carrow met with the Death Eaters stationed in Hogsmeade and told them that they had been reassigned to the Ministry and that others would be coming to take their place here. Her gaze was firm, her manner authoritarian, as if she was entirely used to commanding troops in battle. With a dark, hooded glare and a bitter smirk, Amicus Carrow informed the Hogwarts staff that they would be having a staff meeting in preparation for the new semester. The staff, with stiff formality, acceded to this. The timing was very precise. 50 minutes gone, 10 minutes to go. The woman who looked very like Electo looked at the man, whose looks were those of Amicus. "We don't have to do this," she said softly, gentleness strange with her face and voice. "Sure we do," he said, and his voice turned the humor dark. "When else are we going to get a chance to teach these classes the way they should be taught? I'm pretty sure it's wrong somehow. They're going to enjoy being locked in a trunk more than they'll enjoy Azkaban," he said, dropping his voice. "And I don't know where else we'll send prisoners, even with reforms at the Ministry." She sighed. "Focus on who you're going to be," he ordered, and set his expression in his best Death Eater snarl. He was the best. He was a sadist. He was, well, a complete git. Onwards to the staff meeting. "Will the headmaster be joining us?" Professor McGonagall asked Harry from the other side of the staff table, and Harry tried to avoid the urge to jump or beg her not to take house points. "He's gone," Harry said, and reconsidered this immediately. Professor Snape wasn't gone. That is, he's not well. "What's wrong with him?" Harry fought the urge to draw his wand at the light in her eye. "Ugh." "That is not relevant," said his sort of sister. "However, in his absence we will be running Hogwarts as we see fit." This provoked a very pointed silence. "I shall be taking my classes on field trips to the Muggle cinema to emphasize how disgusting it is," she continued. "That sounds very educational," Slughorn said, attempting to sound jolly. "My class will be learning the importance of clearing one's mind and being at peace with oneself," Harry said very solemnly. Another short, more confused silence. "I sense death very close to you," Professor Trelawney said, and sniffed. "I've always thought you were a very underesteemed soothsayer," Harry told her absently. "We really must give you a raise." "We can give her a raise," said the woman who looked like Electo. "We could give them all raises." Right, he said firmly. Raises for everyone. Next order of business. Professor Sprout said cautiously, Are you feeling quite all right? Harry attempted to look forlorn. It didn't really fit his current face. I have very mixed feelings about Lord Snakeface being dead. Hermione broke into helpless giggles, covering her face in her hands. Ha, Harry declared. I win, I win. I kept a straight face longest. Youchita, Harry Potter, she said, still choking on laughter. Lord Snakeface, indeed. You are awful and should be ashamed of yourself. Harry Potter, asked Professor McGonagall, drawing their attention away from each other. It's all lies, he assured her. I'm Amicus Carrow. I like kicking puppies and scowling at people. Harry Potter's just a lie made up by our enemies to annoy us. He doesn't even really exist. Your father once told me that James Potter was an elaborate fiction based on polyjuice, and thus couldn't be given detention. Harry looked down and smiled. Professor Slughorn had risen from the table, and Harry let Hermione point her wand at him. Sit down, please, Professor. Harry and I have things to talk to you all about, and I'd still like to discuss whether it will be possible for us to take our newts on time. We could take them next year, Harry mutters. There's time. Don't be silly, said Hermione. So, where is our third prankster, Mr. Potter? Asked Professor McGonagall, expression far more human. Where is Mr. Weasley? Ron, he's been home with Spattergroit this whole time. The Dark Lord is really dead? Asked Slughorn, back in his chair. Tom Riddle is dead, Harry agreed, though the time isn't right to confirm that publicly. His hair was curling into its usual mess, just as Hermione's hair was losing its redness, as they both reverted to their regular appearances. So, can we stay and teach? Hermione asked. I promised to keep up with my coursework as well, and we've all been using the syllabi to try to keep up. Harry's had some trouble with the protean charm, but I'm sure he'll do fine now he has a little less on his mind. Ravenclaw missed out on a great deal when you were chosen for Gryffindor, said Professor Flitwick. I would be happy to help our new defense teacher master his charms in time for his newts, though of course we will have to schedule it around the class schedule. The Hogwarts class schedule resembled nothing so much as its tangle of magical staircases, with no logical pattern even Hermione had been able to determine. But if Professor Flitwick said it was possible, Harry would believe him. Fantastic, Professor Slughorn, and Harry turned to the nervously sweating man. I've got this question about blood replenishment potion. Chapter 154, Defense Against the Dark Arts. In celebration of their return to Hogwarts, Harry locked himself in a potions lab for a day and a night, and made packets of cheering lemon drops for the whole school. He hadn't really wanted to think about candy these past 6 months, because candy was something he'd shared with Dumbledore, but now it seemed like the only possible right thing to do. Hermione, as should have been entirely predictable, had a series of hysterical meltdowns about her class syllabi, and she just wasn't ready to be a teacher, and what if she was terrible at it? The point that she really couldn't possibly be worse did not seem to sway her, not that she would have been Hermione if she'd been so swayed. Professor Slughorn didn't gather his courage and do anything particularly heroic one way or another, so Harry felt free to continue pestering him about the details of potion combinations, blood replenishment, antivenom, general healing, and after effects of dark curses, just to take a random example. A man wearing a large floppy hat and a false beard and sunglasses turned up to deliver a new statue to the defense teacher, which Harry had placed in an unused staff office, and then had to go sit quietly until the urge to scream went away. At least Sirius looked really ridiculous with a Dumbledore beard. Ironically, the first thing Harry said in his defense classes was, "Wands away." He was obeyed without question as he quizzed the classes on the syllabus, choosing names from the roster at random as a way to learn their names. Right until Monday's third class, when someone dropped a haircare potion in his classroom and he was abruptly glossy. He summoned a small hand mirror, examined his new hair, and said evenly, "Thank you to whichever student that was. I've been meaning to try something new." The baby Hufflepuffs exchanged uneasy looks with each other, but Harry went on with the lesson as if nothing had happened, leaving the haircare potion to beautify his class until someone caught it again. He returned to seeing if Amicus Carrow had gotten anything about minor dark creatures to stick in the third year's heads. Hint he had not. "It's hopeless," he told Hermione that afternoon over tea, watching her undo a multitude of red braids that had ended up making her hair almost as crinkly as her natural look. "They're all dead scared of me and could hex their classmates blind, but there's nothing in there about anything that you can't solve with hexing or cursing," as if he managed to entirely skip the very important lesson that sometimes the best defense is running away. "I decided to review the Muggle government and legal system," Hermione said. "I certainly have enough to criticize about our courts." Harry decided not to ask, on the theory that he knew nothing about Muggle courts and didn't want to have to care. "The meeting tonight?" he asked instead. "Oh, yes," she took another lemon tart. "Missing Ron," Harry hazarded, since Hermione was not usually a lemon tart person. "I don't find it all as funny as you do," she said quietly. "How long before we can stop this? I hate talking this way about regular people." "So stop. Stop talking about politics altogether. Talk about science and the moon and whatever you want to talk about, Hermione. If kids complain, they complain. We can handle it." "Most of them won't, except maybe a few of the Slytherins. But some of the ones who don't complain will still talk about it to their families. Technically, we're still searching all their mail. We could erase bits that talk about us." "That's so unethical, Harry." "Suppose I've had terrible role models." Hermione could have argued with this, and didn't. Harry eyed her over his teacup. "Harry," she looked up and met his eyes squarely. "What you said at the staff meeting. I've noticed you tend to make little jokes about things that are really bothering you. How much is his death bothering you, really?" Sometimes Harry hated that Hermione was really clever. He took a strengthening swallow of tea and then poured himself another cup to buy time. "Ginny told me once that the worst thing about him was that he wasn't all bad." The steam rising from his teacup really did make interesting patterns. "He might not have been all bad, but he was pretty close, wasn't he?" "Yeah, but even if he was cold and evil and thought about murder the way you think about, whether to vanish a potion that hadn't come out quite right," Hermione offered. "Exactly. He was also. He wasn't nice or honorable, not really, but he knew how to play it on the telly. And he could be so clever, Hermione, you have no idea. He talked to Professor Snape sometimes about books and potions and all that, and I couldn't understand a word of it, but I knew it was a memory I could go back to for years and years and still learn something from. And when he was in a good mood, he did like teaching." Harry smiled crookedly. "I think it made him feel clever and superior." Hermione watched him levelly, and he looked away from the sympathy in her eyes. "Anyway, he wasn't complicated, not really, but I feel complicated about him. I always thought he was trying to get you to come over to his side." "Sort of. He wanted me to surrender, of course. That's part of why he didn't see what I was doing. But he wouldn't have actually been happy if I'd surrendered, or if the war was over, and he'd just been head of magical Britain. He would have gone looking for his next fight. There was someplace empty inside him, even before he started splitting his soul up. I worried when I found out he had been top of his year, that it was a bad thing to be, a bad sign. You're going to be a great witch, but not an evil witch." "Thanks, Harry." "Right, enough moping. Surely we have more work to do." They did, indeed, have more work to do. Chapter 155, Meetings and Lemon Drops. Time flies when you're trying to keep up with Hogwarts' 7th-year curriculum, teach 7 years of students, and research antidotes and dark spell reversal to rescue your mentor from being stone. Harry might have flagged, but his definition of a stressful situation had recently undergone an upgrade. If it was something to do besides look at his own face in the papers, still undesirable number one, he'd do it. Taking a page out of Professor Snape's book, he ruthlessly assigned detention to anyone clever enough to grade homework and assigned them the homework from the next grade down, or set them to setting up obstacle courses for their fellows. Divide and conquer, that was the ticket. At least he and Hermione had who had been informed of the situation on the first night, and had since cooperated in getting detentions to help with homework, and also some evocative screaming to imitate being tortured. Harry took his own turn screaming. It was quite cathartic. Hermione made him stop assigning Ron and Neville detention, just so that they could scream together, which Harry thought was rotten of her. Some weeks in, Hermione took a moment between classes to drop by and ask, "Polyjuice isn't actually addictive, is it?" Harry blinked at his red-headed sister, pulled his mind out of his persona for a minute, and said slowly, "I'll check." He checked. It turned out most people weren't so able with making potions or so paranoid about discovery as to have it come up much. "I think we need to take the weekend and apparate somewhere we can use our own faces." Which he did not want to do. There was too much to Dorothy's weekend, but that was true every weekend. The Quidditch teams, technically banned, but reconstituted as unofficial sports clubs that Harry pretended to be blind about, were practicing out the window. Life was awful. Harry and Hermione managed one evening at Grimmauld Place, fencing with Mr. Malfoy about what happened with Voldemort and their plans for the future before they decided camping in a forest for the weekend sounded very nice. Which turned into a dueling battle with snatchers, because Harry's life could never be simple, but dueling felt easy lately. The team of thugs were unconscious and trussed up, and Harry and Hermione exchanged glances. "I guess we're spending our weekend off at Azkaban," Harry asked. Hermione sighed. "I've been meaning to check in with the army, I guess." A series of apparitions and a short ferry ride later, they passed the Death Eater thugs into waiting cells for processing. Mary Cattermole saluted Hermione and reported, "Ma'am, may I introduce my husband Reg? He's quit working at the ministry to help out cleaning here. There is a lot of cleaning to do." "At ease," Hermione sighed. "Honor to meet you, ma'am, Mr. Potter," said Reg Cattermole. "Can't thank you enough for all you've done. Who are these, then?" "Snatchers," said Hermione. "Please try to figure out if they're volunteers or under the Imperius. Those will need separate wings until we sort out trials." "Of course, ma'am," said Mary. "Anything else?" "How have things been here?" "Oh, fine. Quite funny, actually. The ministry keeps sending us Muggle-born, and we just turn around and recruit them. Apparently the army or Azkaban is a winning pitch." Harry was beginning to have a headache, but he had to agree that was quite funny. "Carry on, then," Hermione said. Later, Harry said, "They, take you quite seriously. I keep wanting to tell them I'm only a teenager, but it seems to keep them focused. Maybe I could get the order to call me sir." Hermione surveyed him. "Not with that hair." Harry really was not sure why his hair was the running joke. Hermione shrugged, unrepentant. "I wish I could figure out what I'm doing wrong with my darkness antidote," he added. "It would solve figuring out who was under the Imperius if I could just lift it." "Harry, you're trying to solve a problem that's never been solved before without the assistance of a potion master. I've seen you with Professor Slughorn. He can't be that helpful while running away." It was true that Professor Slughorn had taken to running away when he saw Harry, in as dignified a manner as a man of Professor Slughorn's age and girth could run away. But Harry had thought that was just his face. "I thought that was just my face." "No, Harry," she sighed. "I would have thought I'd see more Dementors about the place," Harry said to change the subject. "You would think," Hermione said, and changed the subject to homework. It turned out that fighting a war was long stretches of boredom interspersed with terror, Buttreninga War was mostly meetings. The meetings, staff meetings, order meetings, army meetings. Harry went to them all, tried to be patient with 100 questions he didn't want to answer and thus didn't, because looking mysterious and twinkly had always worked for Dumbledore, and doodled potions notes in the margins of his parchment. Recounting the minutes of the meetings would be an exercise in boredom, but a few things should be said. Bellatrix Lestrange, as Voldemort's remaining chief lieutenant, seemed to see it as her duty to hold things together in his absence. He was rumored to be on the continent, scouting for some super weapon. They were a little out of date on that one, but not on the wrong track, Harry thought, then offered the sharer of this rumor a lemon drop. Harry preferred the Order's suspicion about him to the Army's near worship, but both groups had the same basic problem. The enemy could use magic, too. And unless they wanted to copy Voldemort's habit of raiding people's houses while they slept, it was quite tricky to ambush wizards in ways where they didn't just teleport away to try another day. A bit of cautious testing had demonstrated that the taboo had broken with Voldemort's death, so they couldn't even say the name in a large circle of angry Muggleborn and summoned Death Eaters until they ran out of Death Eaters. Small favors included the giants, vampires, and werewolves knowing a bad bet when the leader of your allies disappeared mysteriously, and they seemed willing to fade back into the woodwork. It was tempting to skip order meetings to avoid Moody's idea of an identity test, and Mrs. Weasley's idea of an attempt to persuade Harry to stay out of the war from now on. But Harry's natural curiosity won out. And then there was this exchange. So Sirius got us some hippogriffs. Harry was beginning to explain, having decided that they'd keep asking about Azkaban if he didn't give them something. Sirius Black, asked Moody. Yes, my godfather. I thought he was dead. Harry glanced at Remus Lupin, who looked blank. Well, he's not. You sure it's him? He still has his animagus form. Then he's been AWOL from his order duties. Harry considered this. I guess he was busy. Lemon drop. Chapter 156. Transfiguration is tricky. Harry let himself into Professor Snape's office, closed the door behind him, and turned around. Light came from the lit fireplace. Professor Snape was still a statue. Harry sat down in an armchair across from the kneeling, haggard form and eyed him. Would it be disrespectful to put a sheet over him? He asked Draco. The horror having worn off, the whole thing was mostly worrying and depressing in equal measure. Professor Snape's office, fire-lit, was a comforting and familiar place, its occupant aside. The creepy things in jars seemed to welcome Harry home. Draco was lying on the floor next to the statue, for whatever reason. Absolutely, Harry. Put a sheet over him. No need to be cross about it. I am tired. You make me tired, and this project makes me tired. Why are you here? To check on him, and you. I can't turn him back yet, but Professor McGonagall seems confident I'll be able to in time. Go away. Harry eyed Draco, who was still lying on the floor as if struck down by his life. Blonde hair spread across the dark flagstones in a soft, pale wave. It would have been an attractive picture if Draco wasn't whining again. I would have thought she'd just take care of it, Harry said after a bit, eyeing Draco. Apparently, mixing transfiguration with dark magic is the sort of thing only a student would come up with, because anyone with a solid understanding would know that dark magic creates permanency, and the last thing you want with transfiguration is permanency. Harry was not sure he understood that, but he nodded anyway. Draco continued, so she set me to unraveling it as a punishment, with pointed comments that perhaps joining the Death Eaters and petrifying the staff expert on dark curse reversal was not very clever. Also, she keeps patting me on the head and calling me a good boy. I hate my life. Professor McGonagall pats you on the head and calls you a good boy. Harry tried to visualize this and failed. She's been rather worried about Professor Snape, Draco explained. She says that at least this way she knows where he is and that he's not getting into more trouble. Did you know she's taking this semester as an opportunity to single-handedly steal the house cup from Slytherin? Harry had indeed noticed the drastic reversal in fortunes in the giant hourglasses tracking the house cup, but had decided that it was his duty as sort of headmaster to be biased towards his own house. I hadn't noticed, no. Liar, just the way you haven't noticed our amateur Quidditch tournament. I'm your teacher, you know. I can assign you homework or detention. Try it, Potter. Draco looked at him sharply, suddenly. Here now, what are you doing wearing your own face around the place? Not that it's not an improvement, but it's not safe. You care, I'm touched. It's not safe form, Draco clarified in a hiss. Harry hummed agreeably. Polyjuice may or may not be addictive, so on weekends I'm using my own face and my invisibility cloak. Draco sat up abruptly, shaking out his wand hand, and turned to the selection of rocks and beetles in a cage on the desk. Right back to work. What? Why now? I have a very clear impression of how Professor Snape will react if I let him stay stone long enough for you to develop potion addictions and other bad habits before he has a chance to deal with them. He will blame me, and I do not want him blaming me, Harry. I will not have it. Harry tried to figure out if he should rein in this spurt of inspiration, and decided to egg it on instead. I've also been picking fights with Snatchers and Alastair Moody, he offered. Draco growled, very much like an angry cat, and flicked his wand savagely at a stone teacup without words. It turned into a teacup. They both stared at the teacup, which seemed perfectly normal, blue and white china in a handsome pattern of little flowers. I thought they exploded, Harry asked. They did. This one didn't. Why? Harry grabbed Draco's shoulder before he could sink dramatically back to the ground again. You cast it silently, Harry offered. You don't usually do that. I have the verbal incantation for reversal wrong, Draco breathed. I must have, of course. I just have to figure out what the right incantation should be. Draco smiled brilliantly at him, pale grey eyes warm and alive, blonde hair tousled, and then ran out of the room as if chased by hippogriffs. Harry watched him go, feeling strange and hopeful. Despite this immediate progress, it still took until nearly Easter for all the necessary preparations to be made. Once Professor Snape was defrosted, so to speak, they would have only seconds to halt the flow of blood, administer antidotes and healing potions, and bolster him against shock. There would be after-effects of dark magic, of snake poison, and probably some of the telltale problems of time travel. Madame Pomfrey, much engaged in the problem, helpfully lent Harry a number of books on how to orient time travelers. Meanwhile, the war dragged on, except it seemed less and less like a war and more like an aggressive stalemate every day. The Death Eaters were in a holding pattern. The Ministry had finished its initial purge of Muggle-born and had no idea what else to do with itself, and the Muggle-born army had finished securing their hiding places and were settled in. Harry and Hermione let the Order supervise, more and more overwhelmed by Hermione's brilliant idea to catch up on newts and Harry's brilliant idea to teach classes at the same time. Ron, also caught up in Hermione's brilliant idea to catch up on newts, broke what had been an uneasy sort of silence with Harry to confide. I wouldn't go along with it, but Mum's so happy with it, I can't argue. You just want Hermione to go out with you. Harry marked another essay wrong. Professor Snape's grading methods did come in handy sometimes. Well, sure, but not while she looks like that, I don't. Harry glanced up at Hermione. She looked quite normal, red hair, severe expression. Oh, right. Ron patted him on the shoulder. Sometimes I really worry about you. I'm doing better, Ron, really. Harry no longer felt so strange and distant from his fellow human beings. It hadn't been a bad feeling, but he was glad it was wearing off. I can tell, But you'll take me with you next time, won't you? Harry froze for just a moment, but what answer could he give? Of course, Ron, I promise. Ron nodded, satisfied with his place in the world, and went back to revising for charms. Chapter 157, Healing and Hospital Beds. Retro sum, petrificer lapiciforce. The first thing Severus Snape saw was Madame Pomfrey looking disapproving. In his moment of shock, she pulled his hands away from the wound on his neck and slapped a soaking wet bandage over it before Harry even had a chance to see the ruin that it had become. The yellow bandage stuck firm, as if with a life of its own. Professor Snape looked around, saw Harry, raised a red hand, and said in a bubbly voice, "You idiot." Snape fell silent, slumping, and Harry realized with abrupt clarity why his friends had been so furious with him for saying goodbye. It was a feeling like cutting yourself on broken glass, the finest, sharpest of pains, to know what someone's last words to you would have been. "Here, Severus, lad, drink this," Madame Pomfrey said, tipping Snape's head back quite calmly and pouring a potion down his throat. Then another, until he choked and coughed and his breathing eased as he fell into unconsciousness. "Well," she said, stepping back and wiping her hands, "that went about as well as can be expected, I suppose." She looked around at Harry, at Draco, at Professor McGonagall hovering. "He'll be unconscious for ages now. Out." Harry got out, slumped against the wall outside the infirmary, braced his hands on his knees, and tried to breathe. It was like a battle. Weeks of training and preparation and careful potion making, all decided in a few seconds. Professor Snape was alive. He was alive. Now Harry just had to deal with the possibility of mental tampering, Professor Snape's reaction to everything that had happened, and also Professor Snape's reaction to everything that had happened. It was all very well not to give Professor Snape a vote on your plan for martyrdom, but quite another thing to anticipate explaining this to the man, who would very much think he had a vote. "Thank you very much." "Come flying with me," Draco demanded. "I can't, you know I can't." "Come flying with me. I have dealt with a werewolf, and with the possibility of killing my favorite professor this week, you should at least give me the honor of a practice bout." "I'm in hiding." "Screw your courage to the sticking place, Harry." "Who's been giving you Shakespeare?" "Hermione." She wanted to demonstrate that people other than me had difficult lives, and she thought the tragedies would help me put my life into perspective. Harry could use some perspective right now. "Did it work?" "No, they're all idiots, and I would do it all much better. They should make me King of England." Harry stared at him. Draco looked coolly back. "Have you ever considered humility?" Draco blinked lazily, visibly considering this question. "Ah, Draco. Ah, Draco just saved Professor Snape's life. Harry was legally obligated to be nice to him or something." "You know what the worst thing about today is?" Harry asked, straightening to lean against the wall. "What's that?" "I'm no longer technically headmaster of Hogwarts. By the oldest rules of apprenticeships, apprentices can take their master's roles and responsibilities while their master is ill." Draco eyed him. Harry eyed Draco right back. "Don't say it," Draco warned. "Lemon drop?" Harry asked, and Draco turned and stalked away. "I am going flying by myself," Draco yelled back over his shoulder. Harry sighed philosophically and tugged his invisibility cloak on. Life was always better after arguing with Draco. Professor Snape slept through Easter break, which Harry spent at Grimmauld Place with Draco and the Malfoys. They were never speaking of this again. Harry went to check on him immediately upon his return and found the man, for a change, sleeping. "You could consider waking up this year," Harry informed the still form in the hospital bed hidden in the back corner of the infirmary. "I'm beginning to go mad imagining all the different ways you're going to yell at me." One dark eye cracked open and regarded him. Harry suppressed the urge to flinch and walked up to the bed. "So," Harry said slowly, "how long have you been faking?" "I was hardly going to move without understanding the situation," Snape said, in a croaking voice. Harry's gaze was drawn to the white scar that wrapped around the left side of his teacher's neck, reaching from his jaw all the way down to his collarbone. He hadn't had much throat left. In the Muggle world, he would have died. One mistake in potion preparation or application, and he would have died. There didn't seem to be anything to say. "Report," growled Professor Snape, and suddenly there was everything to say. "Voldemort is dead," Harry said, and turned to pull up a stool so he wasn't looming. "Bellatrix Lestrange is leading the largest faction of Death Eaters, with Yaxley taking point controlling the ministry for them. They're the returners, who think he's not dead, or if he's dead, he's coming back, and they're staying loyal this time. Then there are the fatalists, who think he's dead, and this is their last hurrah. They're committing mass killings, and we're locking them up in Azkaban. The Dementors are on our side now. Sorry, I should do this in order. Returners, fatalists, who else? Reformers, that's Malfoy's lot. They're trying to put in place a pureblood regime based around the old blood, not sketchy half-blood maniacs, trying to clear their reputations up for when the mind control at the ministry collapses in on itself. They're more or less on my side, which doesn't make me want to hex them any less." "Charming," Snape whispered, eyes closing again. "Do you want some food? Ice?" Harry got ice, and Madame Pomfrey made him go away for a whole hour while she checked on things. Harry lurked and wanted to drink polyjuice and be someone else, and wanted to never have had that thought so Professor Snape couldn't read it out of his mind just by looking at his face. "We are really at Hogwarts." Professor Snape had slept again, and then Harry had had to teach classes, but he'd brought his homework and worked on it at the foot of Professor Snape's bed through the night. It was somewhere after midnight, and it was so worth it because Professor Snape was awake. "We're really at Hogwarts. The Carrows. Locked in a trunk." The silence was relatively eloquent. "Hermione and I have been teaching their classes." "Why?" the hoarse voice whispered. "It kept the Death Eaters away. They think the Carrows are carrying on the good fight here, so it's made classes a little tricky, but I'm managing." "You are also taking classes." "Newts are coming up in 2 months. It's April now." It was quiet for so long that Harry returned to his Transfiguration notes, thinking Snape had fallen asleep again. "What of the Order?" "They're keeping busy. Most of them are still under watch, the ones with jobs, so it's mostly ones who have been put into prison who are having the chance to run around and fight the good fight. And most of those are terrible fighters, so we just have them rounding up stray giants and things, doing aura work since the auras aren't allowed to." "I meant the Order and Hogwarts. Professor McGonagall's been keeping an eye on things. She helped turn you back from stone." "Emian," Snape hissed, "what do they think I am doing here?" "Well, Professor McGonagall thinks you're recovering. I am not so ill I will put up with evasion from you." "Fine." Harry stood up so he could look Professor Snape in the face. "Fine, I haven't told the rest of the Order you're alive because you killed Dumbledore and they hate you. Happy?" "Ecstatic," Professor Snape purred, voice husky. "I was beginning to think you'd been replaced by a pathetic, agreeable clone." "I am trying to be nice. You misbegotten excuse for a teacher." Harry was yelling. Harry stopped yelling. Professor Snape bared his teeth in what was not a grin. "I neither need nor want your pity." Harry opened his mouth to yell, closed it, gritted his teeth, took a breath. "You're right. I'm blue really furious with you. You killed Dumbledore. You told me nothing. You played at being headmaster while students were tortured and sent to Azkaban, while everything fell apart, while I was hunted. You joined the Death Eaters in the first place, even though Yauk knew what they wanted to do to people like Hermione, like Mum." Snape's eyes widened, ever so slightly. "So don't tell me," Harry finished very slowly. I'm not allowed to be nice to you. I am going to be nice to you, and you are going to live through this war, and if you don't like it, you can suck on a lemon. I could swear that you have been talking to Albus Dumbledore. I had rather anticipated being done with this particular lecture on the unavoidability of kindness. We had a nice chat while I was a bit dead. Professor Snape blinked. It was a very evocative blink. Harry sat down again on his stool and sighed. It's been a really long, really weird year. Do you really want to argue about who's done the most stupid things? You, Professor Snape said immediately. If this was Draco, Harry would have made a joke about, why did I save your life again? But this was not Draco. Professor Snape did not have endless depths of arrogance, not about his value to other people. I'm really glad you're alive, Harry said, because stark truth had always been the ground he and Professor Snape met on, even when it had been the stark, barren ashes of hatred. I look forward to getting back to work. Well, Harry hadn't really been expecting anything well-adjusted, so he supposed he couldn't complain. Chapter 158. Snape Expresses Opinions. Hello, Severus, Professor McGonagall said quietly. Harry jolted out of his doze, leaning against the wall. Minerva, I see Poppy is a tattletale as ever. She is. She knows I have been concerned. It is not every day the victim of a cursed magical snakebite is cursed to be petrified into stone by an amateur transfiguration expert in order to prevent them dying of blood loss. Ah, I had wondered. You owe Mr. Malfoy thanks, or she could see Snape's expression and Harry couldn't from his seat by the wall, or at least a kind word so that he knows you are not plotting his death. As if a kind word from me meant I was not plotting someone's death. Severus, Albus. Harry realized, as Snape didn't answer, that Snape didn't have a ready, silver-tongued explanation at hand. Well, then. Harry stood up, drawing both of their attentions. I can explain that one. I talked to Professor Dumbledore most recently. Neither interrupted. He came to stand by the bed on the opposite side from the sleep-robed Minerva McGonagall. He found a cursed ring that he thought would let you speak to the dead, and he got very excited about talking to his sister. It was a fatal curse, so after that it was just a matter of figuring out how his death could be useful. Severus. He has the main points. I don't much appreciate him choosing Professor Snape to help with that, but no one asked me, did they? The day I consult with you on a plan of battle is Snape tried to sit up and broke off, grimacing. Are you hurt? Harry asked, keeping the panic out of his voice. Spare me your sentiment, boy, Snape said, slumping backwards into the bed. You have been spending too much time talking to Voldemort, and Harry never thought he'd say that to someone else. Are you hurt, sir? No, just weak. Harry knew how Professor Snape felt about weakness. Should we leave you alone? Go. I will talk to Minerva without you hovering. Harry hesitated. Harry left, grabbing his things, and felt both like he escaped and like he shouldn't leave. Obedience, however, was still a habit after all, even after everything. For another week, Professor Snape confined himself to the hospital wing. Harry heard third-hand about a planned visit from Alastor Moody, headed off by Professor McGonagall. Snape interrogated Harry about the events of the past 3 months while he had been stone, Harry's time on the run, and the potions he has used or created to aid Professor Snape's recovery. Harry even introduced him to Canary, the yellow bandage potion made with myrtle, which took the form of a small yellow bird and sang a song for the man while Snape glared at it. And then there was this exchange. Snape looked sharply at Harry, after Harry mentioned one of the army's operations. How are you supplying and funding an army? Well, for Muggle things like food, the Prime Minister is helping. Sirius got a job working for him. And what job, exactly, is a felon qualified for in the Muggle government? He won't say. He just grins and says, Black, Sirius Black. Snape looked blank. Harry shrugged. It was better than our first idea, to make a deal with the goblins. Yes, just a little better. Or maybe a lot better, judging by that expression. On Sunday evening, Professor Snape was out of bed, dressed, and reviewing papers. "Professor," Harry said slowly, "what are you doing?" "I will be resuming my duties tomorrow. In the absence of a defense teacher, I will be taking the class. I've been teaching them fine. Only in contrast to Gilderoy Lockhart. In any case, you have Newt exams to consider. Hermione Granger will also need to cease this charade and inform her army that they must coordinate with the Order for the duration. That probably would mean Harry actually got some sleep that wasn't curled up in a corner of the infirmary. But I'm really not sure who put you in charge, Harry said instead. Albus Dumbledore. Really. And the Dark Lord that was, Snape added judiciously. One of the few things they agreed on was that I was the appropriate next headmaster of Hogwarts. Harry resisted the urge to say, yes, but they were both crazy. Your occlusion is spotty, as usual, Snape observed in a whisper. I expect you in the 7th year Gryffindor classes, starting first thing Monday, Potter. If you tell me what this is about. I much preferred you at 12 or 13, when you assumed I made my decisions solely to torture you. I grew up. Yes, that is readily apparent to me. Wait, what? Snape continued. In a war of attrition, the side that can convert others to their cause through spellcraft will win. We must draw them out. You and I are the best bait for that trap. Athagwarts, what about all the kids? The children can be evacuated when the time comes. Harry thought that charmingly understated his own influence over the student body's attitude towards danger, but he decided to leave it for a surprise. They deserved a chance to fight, too, he sighed. Lovely bait again. You should be pleased, Snape said absently. With the uncertainty of attack, I can't test your new aptitude for snake venom antidotes on you just yet. You're not serious. Professor Snape smiled at his papers. It was not reassuring. I'm sorry about arguing, and getting killed, and nearly getting you killed. You will be, Professor Snape said, quite cheerfully. You're dismissed. Harry left the room, contemplating a future where Professor Snape expressed his displeasure clearly and painfully through the surprise introduction of various poisons into Harry's day. Once he was sure Professor Snape couldn't see him, Harry started grinning and laughed to himself in pleased anticipation all the way to his quarters. He'd have to pack if he was going to be Harry Potter tomorrow. Chapter 159. Back to potions, finally. Harry settled into his seat in Charms and got out parchment and quill. To his left, Hermione arranged her things precisely. To his right, Ron made no pretense of attentiveness, wand in hand, and gaze flickering across the room. Ron had grown alert this past year. Harry glanced at the seat behind him where Neville sat, then turned to face the front of the classroom again. "Ah, Mr. Potter, Miss Granger," said Professor Flitwick, smiling and twinkling behind his little glasses. "Do you have the homework?" "Yes, Professor," they chorused, and Hermione handed it in while Harry sat back and watched her back. He ignored, as Professor Flitwick continued the class blithely, the confused looks and hisses from his classmates and the students that peered in at him from the hallway. Right now, Professor Snape was teaching his first defense class. Harry took a breath and focused his attention on the lesson. The hilarity of this moment would, after all, be ruined if he showed any reaction other than complete normality. A few judicious hints later, "Oh, I came on the train in September with everyone. You know, I sell those invisibility candies, you know." Harry was firmly rumored to have been at Hogwarts the whole time. Naturally, the entire wizarding world knew by lunchtime. Harry got all the way through his meal before being ambushed. Harry turned, blinked, drew his wand and pointed it at the girl. What was her name? "It's Pansy, isn't it?" Pansy Parkinson. That's right, and I'm turning you in. Oh, well, let's go then. You're turning me in, right? Who are you turning me into? The headmaster, she said firmly. I don't know what's going on, but he'll know. Sounds fine by me, Harry said. I was getting tired of hiding out being invisible anyway. They walked in wary, uneasy silence to the headmaster's office. Headmaster, called Pansy after they'd passed the gargoyle and were heading up the stairs, sounding far less certain now than she had before. I brought Potter. Very good, Miss Parkinson, said Professor Snape, still unseen from the office above. You may go. They crested the top of the stairs. There was a pile of unconscious ministry officials on the floor. One of them was bleeding quite profusely, and Snape was bandaging the wound. Professor, Pansy protested. You are behind the times, Miss Parkinson, Snape lectured absently, tightening his improved tourniquet on the man's leg. Wasn't that Yaxley? The Dark Lord is defeated, and Potter stands victorious. Always know which way the winds are blowing before committing to a side. I expected more of you, really. But, sir... Professor Snape stood up, wiping the blood from his hands with a handkerchief. Would you like to test me, Miss Parkinson? I would regret it. She paled. No, no, sir. I'm sorry to bother you. It's quite all right. I needed to speak to Mr. Potter in any case. Pansy swallowed, looking ill. No harm done, Pansy, Professor Snape said gently. Now off with you. Take it as a lesson. Yes, sir, she said, and fled with very little dignity. I forget you can be nice when you want to, Harry commented, kneeling to check pupils and confiscate wands from the four probably auras. You seldom inspire it in me, Snape said, sitting down in the nearest armchair and leaning his head back against it, breathing abruptly unsteady and expression strained. Core, you're a good bluffer. Idiot, I could handle a schoolgirl like that with no wand and with far less mobility than I have. These, however, were something of a challenge. Should I get Madame Pomfrey? Yes, for them more than for me. Why not just barricade the flue? Simply put, because this will bother them more. They will wonder what has become of their comrades and become fearful. Professor Snape, Harry was reminded, had cut his teeth in this long war on the side Thatka said terror. He wondered how they were liking it being turned back against them. He glanced down at the unconscious bodies as he stood again, satisfied they weren't going to be attacking his teacher any time soon. Not very much, he thought. What did happen to their comrades? Legimancy is not a common skill, nor is it commonly defended against. Harry considered this. I'd like to learn sometime, properly, not with color commentary from evil. What was that like? Harry tried to figure out how to put it. Sort of like looking into a funhouse mirror, Harry settled on. Close enough to be disturbing, not recognizable enough to be really scary. You compromised his judgment, especially regarding Draco and me. He should have killed us years ago, and instead he drew us closer and closer. He said something to Draco about that at the end. You think so? I have thought so for years, but suspected it best to not speak of it. Go, get Pomfrey. Yes, sir. Harry went and got the Mediwitch, and thought about having literally defeated Voldemort with the power of love. He didn't think he'd tell Draco what his special boy who lived powers had been. Draco wouldn't fully appreciate it anyway. There were no further attacks that afternoon. Harry went to see Professor Snape in his old office, finding him hunched over a book on his desk. Potter, you neglected to mention your progress on your as yet nameless potion for the curing of the Imperius. And the after-effects of dark magic, Harry added. I've been a little busy. Unless you wish us to strike down half the ministry, you will focus. I stopped trying variations because I was low on ingredients and running out of ideas for alternate versions, Harry reported. The last version I had some success with used both blood and tears, and I stewed the pennyroyal in wine beforehand. Reporting took a while, and Snape stayed seated and attentive, hands steepled in thought. "It's an inelegant concoction," Snape commented. "But as it happens, it gave me an idea. There is an old potion suitable for clearing the mind and giving the drinker courage and willpower. If we adjust it based on your recipe, we will not have achieved your goal, but we may achieve a potion that allows the cursed to fight the imperious if they have a scrap of will left in them." "What's it called?" "Draft of Valor. Read this while I think." Harry read the ingredients and instructions, which were archaic, arcane, and annoying. Then he read the last ingredient and froze. "Martyr's blood?" Harry asked in a faint voice. "For obvious reasons, I have been reviewing all spells that use it as an ingredient. You are a rare creature now, idiot." "I didn't think." Harry wasn't sure what he hadn't thought. "Obviously, this is what teachers are for, to think when their students are too burdened by their own ignorance to move forward." Harry took a moment to mentally translate that. "I'll work on that, sir. You think we can make this work in time?" "I have nothing else pressing. Come." Harry found, as he prepared ingredients for Professor Snape, that they still worked well together. Or had they worked well together before? He raced ahead, shredding lily roots and dicing unicorn hair, powdering gladiolus petals, and measuring out portions of salt and iron shavings with moonwater. Professor Snape was right that the base ingredients had enough similarity to his own potion to be combined, though he found himself not quite following Snape's variations, as the man took the ingredients and turned them into simmering cauldrons colored in various shades of bronze, gold, and pale sunshine yellow. Time flew by. Harry was distantly aware he was hungry, but the lure of his art was too strong, and the thrill of discovery and of shimmering vapors held him fast. "Your arm," Snape said, and Harry held his left over the first cauldron without delay, palm up. Snape took his wrist, turning it over, and the silver knife bit into his forearm only lightly, and 7 drops of blood fell into the cauldron. Snape's hand on his wrist guided him to the next cauldron, and the next, and the next. Snape let him go, setting down the knife, and pressed a square of linen to Harry's finger. "Cover it. A healing potion would introduce unknown effects." "When do we know if they will work?" "For that, we need test cases. Summon Draco and a test case, if you please." Harry debated for a moment before making his choice. "Darby," he called, and Darby popped into existence looking his usual mix of teary and starstruck. A short mandatory session of chatting with Darby later, Harry sent him to ask for Ron and Draco. Ron turned up first. "We're testing a potion on you," Harry told him, not looking up from his latest batch of flower petals. Stripping them off the flowers was a pain. "Stand over near the wall." "You're lucky I'm used to you when I'm like this," Harry heard him say, but it didn't seem like it really required an answer. A few minutes later, and maybe 40 flowers stripped of their petals, Draco turned up. "This had better be important," said Draco, then paused. "No." "Don't be ridiculous. I'm not even making you drink it," Harry replied, looking back at his work. Time to switch to crushing the salt crystals into powder and mixing that with the powdered petals. "Boy," Snape said, and Harry handed him a small tray of individually measured portions of unicorn hair. "Cast the Imperious on Ron, make him do something not very engaging. We don't want it breaking early," Harry said. "Weigh the sea salt, then transfer it to the mortar and pestle. Crush with a circular, rocking motion, adding the petals to be crushed every 3rd breath." He was almost certain the direction about breathing was just one of those archaic little traditions of messing with people who dared to read your recipes. But you never knew, did you? "He never jokes in this mood," he heard Ron say. "You might as well. We'll get no peace otherwise. Hopefully it's something relevant, not some new wart cure." "Command him to cease prattling," was Snape's contribution to the conversation. "Imperio," Draco whispered. The first batch of potions made Ron, commanded to say whatever was on his mind, want to fight a dragon, or ask Hermione to marry him, depending on the version. The Sunshine Yellow one let him break it, but that was because I was getting up the courage to punch the professor in his honking nose, and I'm not suicidal. Snape grunted, already in the midst of making the next batch. You two don't have anything else to do tonight, do you? Harry asked. Beside us, Alep, Draco asked. Ron, on the other hand, just sighed and pulled up a stool to watch them work. Ron was a good friend. Chapter 160, Moonlight Sonata. Around 3 in the morning, by Harry's slightly confused internal clock, it occurred to Harry to Wonderwithy was staying up all night working on modified drafts of valor. Sir, is there a deadline? Bellatrix will attack with the dawn. She is infected with a taste for the dramatic. You want to figure this out by dawn. Here is a lesson for you in the proper attitude towards potions mastery. A potions master must win before the battle ever begins, because one cannot pause to brew during a duel. Yes, sir. Harry went back to work for a few minutes. Sir, does anyone else know she's attacking at dawn? The Order is aware. Careful. Harry jerked backwards, just barely not colliding with Professor Snape, and taking them both to the ground in a tangle of robes and salt water. Sorry, sir, sorry. Sit down and rest. You may have 20 minutes. Harry sat down on the floor next to a dozing Ron, pulled his knees up to his chest, pillowed his head on his arms, and fell asleep between one thought and the next. Should Professor Snape be pushing himself so hard, so soon? Harry woke up to Draco, shaking his shoulder. HN, are they attacking yet? No, here. Harry looked between the mug of pumpkin juice in Draco's hands and Draco's face, which was a cool mask, and decided not to make a comment about servants. He drank it all in one long gulp, and then put the mug down on the flagstones and got back to work. Their last batch of modified draft of valor before dawn was butter yellow, and indeed smelled faintly of butter and sunshine. That really shouldn't be physically possible, Harry commented. What? Asked Snape. The smell. Spare me. Snape was frowning at their cauldrons. Is there something wrong? Harry asked. The potion itself is elegant enough, but it lacks elegance in delivery. We will have to hold people down. Hard delivery. Harry studied the potions, which were slightly pearly iridescent in their pale yellow splendor. The vapor made him feel confident, as if he could do anything if he just concentrated. Concentrate. Focus on the memory of pearly sheens and potions. Hook it from your mind like a fish. Soap bubbles, floating around Professor Flitwick's classroom, swiftly banned. One of Harry's very first candy experiments. Severus, she has arrived. A silvery, eyeglass-marked Patronus cat told Snape in McGonagall's voice, coming in through the wall in a burst of light. Harry glanced at his teacher. His face was pale and set, eyes glittering. Snape looked back at him. Come, let us speak to our adversary and see if we can draw her into error. Keep careful mark of the time. We have 20 minutes before these need to come off the flame. Snape swept from the room, and Harry followed. Instead of going to the main hall and the main entrance, Snape and Harry headed up and up, until they reached a lookout point on the battlements at the front of the castle. Bellatrix Lestrange and a circle of Death Eaters were at the locked front gate of the outer wall of Hogwarts, and Harry fought off a flashback to a graveyard a very long time ago. He'd grown up since that horrific encounter, hadn't he? He'd died, certainly, and that must mean he'd lived enough first. Being tired was making his brain think funny things. Bellatrix, my dear, said Snape from the battlements, after a brief spell made communication possible and easy if loud. If I had known you were coming, I would have been better prepared. What brings you calling? Open the doors, Severus. I must speak with you. The woman's voice was cold and mad, and reminded Harry strongly of Voldemort. From this distance, he could not see her face. Are we not speaking? I will have words with you. You will explain where our lord and master has gone, and how come you to stand there with the Potter boy. My apprentice, Snape glanced at Harry for a brief, dry moment. You have not forgotten he is a student, I trust. I have been teaching him. Where is our master, Worm? Your master is dead, Bellatrix, as you must have suspected. Perhaps you will join him in death and be together there forever. I certainly could not object. Never, traitor cur. He should have put you down, not trusted you. I will see Yauded. And then it was a matter of dodging an acid green spell. At that distance, it was easy. The sound of explosions and curses from below began, and the clanking of armor for some reason. Snape started sweeping back towards the stairs, and Harry followed. I had a thought, Harry said, trying to figure out how worried he should be about all of this. About the potion distribution. Pouring it on their heads would be awkward. But do you remember that soap bubble candy I made? The one that let you blow bubbles? Snape stopped walking, expression distant. Then he was in motion, striding down the stairs in long, distance-eating strides, almost running. Getsboro's compendium from the forbidden section of the library. We are starting over. Run, Harry. Harry ran, because Professor Snape never used his name. Sparrow's compendium was a huge, leather-bound book clad in iron straps, and it shivered when Harry touched it, but did not scream at him. Being the headmaster's apprentice and a seventh year counted for something, he thought. As he hauled the heavy book downstairs the potions lab, not quite staggering under the weight, he saw battle being joined outside the window. Giant spiders were fighting animate statues, and what seemed like hundreds of spells, red and green and 20 other colors, rebounded across the front lawn. Harry pulled his gaze away and ran, stumbled on the trick staircase, almost fell, caught himself after a frantic, acrobatic tumble, and continued his headlong dash. Hermione was guarding the entrance to the potions lab, wand in hand, as Ginny and Luna hauled away cauldrons of butterpale potion. Harry spared her a smile and ducked inside, where Snape was setting out a whole new set of ingredients: lye and ash, fresh myrtle leaves, flowers and roots, and an array of bottles that Harry knew contained different essential and other oils. Good, Snape said. Find the section on myrtle. It is organized by element, so it will be under fire. Harry swallowed a moment of sheer shock that Snape had told him he'd done well at something. Concentrate. Concentrate, Harry. He flipped through the book as Snape lit a purple flame under his largest cauldron and filled it with water, beginning to add the ingredients for the Valor potion with iron precision. Found it, sir, Harry said, after what seemed a very long few minutes. It felt wrong to be here, not out there fighting. To be keeping Ron, Draco, Hermione from the fight, when the fight was everything that mattered: an end to the war, an end to hiding. Read it aloud. Myrtus, known commonly as myrtle, is sacred to Venus and best harvested when she shines brightly in the heavens. The language was antiquated, the writing ornate to the point of unreadability. Even a couple years ago, Harry would have had trouble interpreting it. It was detailed to the point of absurdity, but it seemed to mean something to Snape. He pushed away the myrtle leaves and roots and began working on the dried myrtle flowers. Harry interrupted himself to ask, "Sir, you can't think you can substitute for gladiolus and live myrtle with dried flowers? Can you?" Keep reading. The compendium is dependable. Harry continued reading and ended up in a section about the spirit of plants and essential oils that completely lost him, despite him knowing all the words. Read that paragraph again, Snape ordered. Harry did so and watched, mystified, as Snape dabbed drops of an oil on the flower petals. It took basically forever. What, sir, can I help? Stand away. I cannot slow down for you this time. Despite his words about slowness, Snape was painfully patient as he applied the oil to the dried flower petals. Harry clenched the edges of his stool to avoid the impulse to talk or move or run off to fight, worried that distraction would cost them whatever had Snape as focused as a falcon on the wing. Then the process of brewing truly began. Snape's hands swept through the air as gently as if coaxing music from a cello, floating between ingredients and cauldron. Just one cauldron, and it took all of his attention, where the man could usually manage 5 at once. Harry lost track of the ingredients and steps, despite his careful attention, and could only watch as Professor Snape worked magic. Moonwater with salt and iron, fur and feathers, oil and lye. Some of the ingredients were the same as the potion of valor. Some steps were from his candy recipe he hadn't even thought Snape knew, and some made no sense whatsoever. He could have sworn he saw Professor Snape sprinkling flower petals into the cauldron with his eyes closed, near the end. Chapter 161, The Battle of Hogwarts. There, Snape breathed, and tapped the side of his cauldron 3 times in the runic ending of one of Harry's living potions, then extinguished the flame beneath it. I hope this was the right decision. Harry shook himself into motion, half hypnotized by the potion's song, and went to get bottles. Himself, Ron, Draco, Hermione. He glanced at Snape assessingly. "Will you be able to fight, sir?" "You must depend on your team," Harry said, wishing Snape had ever played team sports in school. On the other hand, if Snape and his father had actually competed against each other regularly, someone would really have ended up dead, and it probably would have been Harry's dad. So best not. Arrogant as ever. Harry ignored this and poured the silvery iridescent potion into slim bottles while he addressed Draco. "Draco, could you transform some stirrers into wands for blowing bubbles? That's a long handle with a little circle on the end, like a miniature Quidditch hoop." "Since you ask so nicely," said Draco. "Sometimes I forget you're all mad, and then I am reminded." Harry decided he couldn't hear Draco when he whined. Bottles of potion and bubble blowers were paired and set on the countertop. "Should we test it?" he asked his teacher, who was leaning on the counter with his eyes closed. Heck knew Snape had been overdoing it, he knew it. Discipline was one thing, but self-discipline enough to ignore your own pain, and tiredness was just self-destructive. That thought would probably make many, people call Harry a hypocrite. The door crashed open abruptly, and Harry jumped and went for his wand, pointing it at Hermione, face pale, hair tied back sharply. "They've broken through the doors to the Great Hall. The army is coming up from the back now, but they're not duelists enough to do more than box them in." "We're ready," Harry said. "Take a bottle and wand and blow bubbles as you go. It'll help." "Hopefully, probably." "You're lucky I trust you, Harry," Hermione said with a sigh and collected her bubbles. Harry smiled at her, collected his own bottle, and ran for the battle. Pearly, opalescent bubbles streamed across the hallways and staircases of Hogwarts, spreading with Harry's small troop, floating with minds of their own towards the nearest cluster of fighters. Harry saw one pop in Pew's Thickness's face, and the man turned without a pause to hex the white-masked figure fighting by his side to the ground, and then charged screaming at the Death Eaters. So, a few kinks to work out still in this potion. Harry thought through the buzzing in his ears, as the controlled chaos of the battlefield became the utter chaos of people under imperious switching sides mid-battle, mad with the horrors they had been made to inflict. Maybe combine it with some of the ingredients of a calming draft, next time. "Weasley," Thickness yelled at his aide. "Next time I'm under the Imperius, you have my official permission to hex me." "I'll need that in writing, sir," Percy yelled at him cheerfully, casting a bright yellow transfiguration at someone about to hex Thickness in the back. Harry ran onwards. In the great hall, Stan Stumpike let out a war yodel and was felled by 3 killing curses, but his fellow Death Eater's distraction allowed Hogwarts defenders to stun all 3 murderers, one of whom was hit by a pearly bubble as she was crumpling. Unconsciousness cut off her sob. The battle built, crested, and then paused. "Hold!" yelled Bellatrix Lestrange over the general chaos, and the Death Eaters held, ducking behind overturned tables. She was in a small, clear area in the middle of the hall, surrounded by bodies and rubble, and facing off against the tall, sturdy form of Neville Longbottom. "What did you say?" she demanded, voice carrying. "I said I'll tell you what happened to Voldemort," Neville repeated loudly. "Where is he?" she demanded, advancing, wand raised. Harry was too far away to do any good, and there were groups of the fallen and the injured besides. He tried anyway, creeping closer. "Answer me, Crucio." Neville collapsed to his knees and whispered something. Bellatrix stepped closer, hair wild, eyes full of madness. Harry was very close now, but Neville met his eyes and shook his head a tiny, tiny bit. Harry ducked down behind a chair and watched. Neville clutched his wand and gasped, "Mufflato." Bellatrix asked a question. Neville said something. She asked the question again. He raised his head and spoke again, more loudly. She opened her mouth and began a spell. Neville reached into his robes. Harry heard nothing but a muffled buzzing as the mandrake screamed. It seemed to Harry that the battle ended very quickly, but when he looked at the sun later, he realized it was past noon, and he had just lost time in potion brewing and running, and the odd flow of time when one had not slept in more than a day. He found Professor Snape sitting on the staircase between the first and second floors, empty potion bottles scattered around him, Draco sitting by his side. Professor Snape looked completely at his ease, the high collar his black robe combining with his long black hair to hide the white scar that Harry knew covered his neck, elbows on knees, wand held loosely. "You can't get up, can you?" Harry said, glaring at his errant mentor. Snape found the energy to glare back at him. "I am merely resting, you insolent brat. Wrap your arm properly, you're dripping." Harry looked down at his forearm, which was a mass of bloody linen tied haphazardly. Well, that looked spectacularly awful. It didn't hurt. Well, it hadn't hurt until he thought about it. No, it hurt, stinging fiercely, and he realized he was hungry, thirsty, exhausted, and covered in stone dust besides. He wished he hadn't thought about it. He sat down next to Snape, Draco on Snape's other side, and accepted a fresh square of linen from Draco. Harry began rebandaging his arm. "I don't understand how you made that potion at all, sir." "I should hope not. If you understood everything I could do, I would have nothing left to teach you." Harry brightened, since that was a very good point. "So, how did it work?" "Ah, well, I can explain the general principles," Snape said, sounding suddenly younger and faintly embarrassed. I should not like you to think that that was proper procedure. I made no notes as I proceeded, and I was, ad-libbing quite a lot. I'm not entirely sure I could recreate it." Harry paused to savor this moment of humanity from his teacher. "It worked," he reported, finishing his bandaging and folding his arm gingerly over his chest where it wouldn't be jostled. Aside from the little berserker problem, battle's over." "Obviously." Neville got Bellatrix Lestrange. Neville Longbottom tricked her into listening to a mandrake song from less than a foot away. He put out his own eardrums to do it. He's fine, if temporarily deaf. She's really, really dead. "Bellatrix Lestrange is dead," Snape repeated distantly. "Yes," Harry said slowly. "I just said that. Bellatrix Lestrange is dead. Lord Voldemort is dead." It sounded like a formula or a mantra. It sounded disturbing, somehow, alarm bells ringing in Harry's head. Snape's breath caught in his throat as his eyes went wide and staring, whites showing all around. A shudder racked his body, and then another and another. His breath came in great gasps until he slumped abruptly back against the steps, a puppet with his strings cut. Draco reacted first. "Your name is Severus Snape," Draco said in a low, urgent voice. "We're at Hogwarts. It's April. We just won the battle against the last of the Death Eaters. Your name is Severus Snape." Snape sat up slowly, face drawn in stark lines, dark eyes still wide and staring. He was shaking, and Harry wanted to kill Voldemort all over again. Much, much more slowly. "I know, Draco," Snape whispered. I remember now. Thank you for your assistance. I did not recall properly until now. Sir, Harry whispered. Sir, are you? Snape grabbed the stone banister and hauled himself jerkily to his feet. He looked between Draco and Harry, confusion and panic locked swiftly behind an expressionless mask. I have just remembered something. Pray see to things here. I have an errand to run. He strode away as if pursued by demons, and Draco and Harry watched him go in shared silence, before turning to look at each other. What? Said Draco, pale and fey. The hell, finished Harry. Chapter 162, Epilogue. The war was over. Pew's thickness seemed to still be minister, just quite a bit less evil about it. The castle was abuzz with ministry officials, medics, and reporters. Harry shamelessly avoided all of them. There were casualties. Bodies were laid out in the great hall, though no one seemed to expect Harry to help with it. He'd been wandering aimlessly for what felt like hours, but probably wasn't. Too wound up to sleep, and unwilling to be cornered by someone well-meaning to eat or commiserate or have to make decisions. Harry found himself back in the great hall, now almost certain that there weren't stray Death Eaters hiding about, or at least as certain as he and the map could make it. Everyone seemed to be in the great hall. The minister was there, and the entire Weasley clan seemed busy alternatively yelling at and hugging Percy. Sirius and Remus were standing by one of the bodies, over on the other side of the hall. Sirius had his arm around Remus' shoulders. Harry hurried over to them. Remus, Harry called, where's Tonks? He looked down at the body. Alistair Moody seemed very peaceful in death, and Harry blinked hurriedly. Actually, Remus said, looking away, she's just given birth. Our son Teddy was born last night. The timing, she wasn't thrilled with me coming to fight. She'll get over it, eh? You're a hero, said Sirius. Women like that. Because you know so much about the fairer sex, Remus said, with tired amusement. I have a girlfriend, you know, Audrey. She likes me. Does she know anything about you? She knows the important things. Rotten family, good friends, a little bit of trouble with the law that is all sorted out now. Good job. Harry. Alistair Moody was dead, and Harry should be sad about that. He should be sad about all the people from the army and Hogwarts that had died, for there were many of them, instead of being guiltily grateful that his loved ones were alive. I wonder if Theodore Alistair's a good name, Remus mused. No, Sirius said baldly, but wizard names are all awful, so he'll fit right in. You should listen to Sirius, Harry chimed in. He's a keen observer of human nature, you know. Sirius snorted and wrapped his other arm around Harry's shoulders. Where's Beaky, then? If you mean Professor Snape, Harry said doubtfully. He said he'd forgotten something and needed to go find it. This did not quite convey the disturbing effect of whatever had been done to Snape's mind, but Harry was too tired to deal with that. Snape would be back, at which point Harry would knock him down until he started making sense again. Then all's well that ends well, huh? Why don't you go find your friends and leave cleanup to the politicians, said Sirius. Are you sure? Dead sure, go on. Harry went. Specifically, he went to stand with Hermione, who was in the entrance hall dripping a healing potion into Neville's ears and lecturing the deaf boy on deliberately ruining your own hearing to win a duel. Neville, blithely unaware of this, was grinning. Harry sat down on a stone step and watched with pleased tiredness. Ron sat down next to him, apparently done yelling at Percy. So you know what this means? Ron asked. We don't have any mysteries or wars to fight for the rest of our time at Hogwarts. 2 whole months with nothing but studying and exams. Harry contemplated this, frowning. I guess we'll live. The door of the main entrance creaked open on bent hinges, making the most awful noise. Harry looked up and squinted. Professor Snape was silhouetted against the noonday light, shadow stretched black along the corridor flagstones. Harry watched him glide into the school as Harry's eyes adjusted to the increased light. Professor Snape was carrying a baby. This is my daughter Minerva Delphine, Snape said matter-of-factly to the speechless group. Minerva, this is my idiot apprentice and his idiot friends. Never do anything they would do. The baby was pretty, for a baby, with a little bit of silver hair covering her scalp and baby blue eyes, wrapped in a soft-looking green blanket. She cooed and grabbed at Snape's nose, which was an obvious target for a baby. Harry was no good with baby ages, but she seemed mid-sized for a baby, not the red, squashy sort of newborn, but obviously not old enough to be called a toddler. Said Harry, trying to figure out how to phrase, don't babies usually come with mothers? Professor Snape surveyed them with cool, dark eyes. That is absolutely none of your business, he said to all their unspoken questions, and swept past them up the stairs, addressing the baby as he did so. Come along, Minerva. I need to introduce you to your godmother. Don't know what we were worrying about, Harry, Ron confided. There's always going to be something weird going on. Harry considered this, absently getting out a packet of lemon drops and popping one of them into his mouth. It sounded about right. There would be exams to take, potions to brew, poisons to frantically find antidotes for, and a great many mysteries to solve, and the whole future stretched out ahead of him with family and friends in it, a weird, unexplored, unpredictable vista. When his apprenticeship was over, he could try out kissing again. There were no more prophecies about him. He could choose to be anything or anyone he wanted, an aura, a potion master, a candy maker, a teacher, a writer of improved potions textbooks. When life gave you lemons, you made lemon candy.